Hello everyone, in this video I want to showcase a builder with the Mongols that's meant to hard counter the boar play done by the Rus. Rus is one of the few civs that Mongols struggles against, at least by win rate at higher levels. And on the ladder at least, the most Rus won't have too much of a backup plan, so having a counter to the board play is the easiest way to gain an easy win against the Rus as a Mongol. So this setup is as always same for Mongol. Want to build an Ubu, there's no scenario as Mongol where you don't want to build an Ubu and then rest 5 to gather on wood. Obviously, it's just more basic Mongol things, but you want to prioritize having a closed gold and a closed stone for the most part. Against Rus, that might be potentially a bit different, as with 4 scouts, they can have an easier time burning it down than with other civs, but as a modern general rule of thumb, you want to have prioritize gold over stone. Now I forgot to queue back my villager after construction, which is something that you should do after constructing. You should queue your villager back to the food. Now with Mongols, that usually you want 2 scouts regardless. The only time I think it's viable to go for 1 scout is if you have your Uwu within the range of your TC, so your opponent's scouts cannot harass it. Other than that, always you need at least a 2nd scout, just in case your opponent tries to burn down your Uwu. I forgot to put the rally back on the TC, but like minor mistakes was probably my first game of the day. I just not that good. But yeah, with this build you wanna go for early horseman. And the reason for that is first of all, they can usually by this point you do get your horseman out. It's probably going to be a bit too late, but they can help you contest the remaining bounty that's left on the map. And if not, even you basically disallow your opponent from getting a safe boar, because your the standard pull time for the Rus to go on boar is at 4:30. There's also 6-minute pull timing, but that's for ITC, I believe. So 4:30 is the most common pull time for the boar, and you will have horsemen out before that. The most important part in early game, well, obviously to deny bounty is one, but second, you want to scout the location of both boars. For obvious reasons, you will want to block the boars, and it will be quite difficult for you to do without knowing their location. The most likelihood is that your opponent is going to go for the closest one to them. But yeah, upon them learning of you having horsemen, they might try to circumvent you. Hence, at around 3:30ish, you want to have both of your scouts, or at the very least 1 scout, next to your opponent to see, in case he moves out early onto boars, to catch any of his villager movement. So you want to keep 9 on food at the very least. You don't really want wood production, gathering, I guess. You only really want like 1 or 2 on wood. This is a particularly nice spawn that I didn't need to create a gear to gather for my gold, which would have delayed me a little bit, I guess. But honestly, even if you need to create a gear, you can move. You can still create a horseman before the 4:30-minute mark, so it should not be a problem either way. When transfer some villagers off of gold, as I'm close to 200 and I'm not planning to get an upgrade before aging up. And now at around 4-minute mark, I'm gonna start positioning my scouts around the base. I would recommend getting there a bit earlier, I would say, as they can move out a bit early, given that if they've seen your horseman or your stable being dropped down. Now the most likely plan of action after they have seen your existence of your horseman is to potentially, instead of going for a boar, is going for a deer. Boar and deer have I don't know, I can't recall if they have the exact same gather rate, but they have quite similar gather rates. so it's not much of a setback for going for Diaz. The main problem is that they don't have as much food on them. I believe it's the same gas rate, it's just that they don't have as much food on them, and you cannot get them as close to your tower or hunting cabin. Now I know that there's a deer camp at the bottom of the map, and that I saw him moving out first up to the boar and then changing his course. So you want to intercept any of his villager movement. You want him to stop from creating a tower. In the base case scenario, you want him to start committing to a tower and then come start harassing when it's around 1/5, 1/4 of the way through. That way, if he commits to sticking it, he will lose most villagers, and if he doesn't commit to sticking it, then he'll lose some money from having to cancel the tower, assuming you get hit. So your priority isn't really on aging up. You don't really need to age up because your main point is to deny their initial play. So you don't need to worry about having an insanely good timing for aging up, as it doesn't really buy you much. Now, depending on how your early game went, if you were able to gather a lot of sheep and deny your opponent a lot of sheep, at different times your opponent will start running out of food. So your main goal would be is to make sure that your opponent gets no access to any sort of food resource outside of their sheep under ZTC. So you look at the map to see all of the closest food sources. Obviously they have the berries that are spawned next to the ZTC, then have the berries above them and the deer under them in this case scenario. So you want to make sure that they are not able to go onto those locations. As you can see, he was trying to sneak some villagers to build a tower without pulling all of them, so that if I was only paying attention to a group of villagers, I would have not have noticed it, which would have allowed him to basically achieve his goal. He could have actually succeeded with this if he pulled a few more villagers, but luckily for me, he wasn't as committed. Yeah, so first you want to consider the closest resources, but don't forget to check other resources too. You probably won't be on your half of the map, but you should definitely keep an eye on both of the deer camps, just to make sure he does not sneak a tower on one of them. Now I lost one scout, so I decided to remake 2, just so that I would have better scouting information about my opponent. The transition here is kind of awkward, as depending on how much sheep you got. If you got a decent amount of sheep, you probably will be fine, but in this case I didn't get that many sheep, so my transition into pasture economy is a bit awkward. I'm just scouting just to see how much sheep he has on this CC. I believe I saw him move out onto the berries. Yep, he has a hunting cabin there, so I'm just trying to deny it. Like I could have pressured the tower a bit more, the wooden fortress, but I didn't. But yes, here you can just all you need to you cannot fully deny berries like this that are so close to the TC. Sometimes you can get a more favored position where they're further away, but you also build a tower. So and the tower is impossible to deny because you can always build it quite close to the TC. So all you want to do is just be annoying as possible, make him waste his villager uptime, just have him idle as much as you can. As berries, it's never like if your opponent is going on berries, you should know that you have the upper hand, because you never want to see Roos on berries. Now he is aging up, and if your opponent is able to get a decent amount of sheep, he will be able to age up without having to go for extra food resources. However, as you saw, he has completely run out of sheep, and now his only food income will be from those berries, which again is incredibly inefficient and also will run out very fast for Roos. So he will have his he's adding horse archers. He will be adding horse archers, which is what the majority of the Roos will do. So he will have his opportunity to go into horse archers, but he will be extremely limited by food. Now, hopefully, as your opponent is stage 3, you want to be keeping an eye on relics to make sure he doesn't get too many. I would say it's if you did a good enough job early on and you were able to keep them in their base, it's not the end of the world if they do get their hands on the relics. But with the Golden Gate, you never want to roost up an extra income because they can efficiently transfer resources into any resource that they want to. I haven't talked much about the actual build order in terms of how many units you want to have on what. I'm just talking about the general concept because this is, each you want to just be spamming horsemen, maybe getting a few key upgrades and heading towards an age up. But again, like I'm not too worried about my opponent, even though he's in the castle age, because I know that he has those berries, and then there's nothing else. And horsemen do a pretty good job of dealing with horse archers, at the very least in low numbers. Not the perfect units, but in low numbers, they deal with them very well. Horse archers are range units, so they take bonus damage from horsemen just like any other range unit would, and it's making them very solid to deal with them as long as you focus target them. Roost does like to have a lot of scouts with their army, so focus targeting the horse archers, especially in numbers, is very key to making sure that you're actually able to kill them. Now, unfortunately, my opponent was able to get his tower up, but he lost all of his horse archers. Well, he's had him more now, but his previous horse archers, and 8 or so workers that went to build said tower, wooden fortress. So while it may not seem like an amazing trade, your opponent is lacking resources. While you have no pressure, you can do whatever you want. I think it is a little bit dangerous, so I don't know if I would recommend it. But if you're so aggressive and applying pressure to your opponent, instead of building up a very fast sheep economy with pastures, you can instead go for pocket economies yourself. The idea being that if you're the one putting on the pressure, your opponent should not have the ability to harass you, and if he does, then you should be able to punish him harder than he can punish you. So yeah, at this point I am a bit more worried because my opponent was able to get the wooden fortress out here, which is not ideal because this is going to be an insanely good source of food for him. But at the same time, I have also got more units out on the field now, so it is easier to deal with than in the early stages. It's not the same as if you got the wooden fortress out at the 6-minute mark and there's nothing I can do about it. I have a lot more presence now. You still want to be heading towards your own age up, of course. But my emphasis is that you don't need to rush your age up as long as your opponent is sufficiently starved out of food. Horsemen are going to be more than good enough units to deal with anything he can make. Obviously, if he goes into knights, you will need to add spearmen, but for horse archers and for man-at-arms, horsemen deal just fine with them. Man-at-arms obviously a bit more of a problem, but they are only a soft counter to horsemen, so horsemen, in large enough numbers, if you don't let them build up their man-at-arm number too high, can deal with them reasonably enough. So I know my opponent unit can become scary if they grow too much, so I'm just trying to make sure to rather A, pick off his units, the horse archers, or B, to prevent him from mining deer as much as possible. I'm still constantly keeping the scout out at the deer to make sure he's not setting up a second pocket economy with my can. Now, ideally, you probably don't want your Khan to be the one doing so, and your Khan to be roaming with your army. So that's probably not the greatest play by me. But anytime he moves out like this without like a line of scouts, and his line of scouts is also quite pathetic, he cannot just handle the horsemen. Just the horsemen are really like, I think people undervalue how well the horsemen can handle dealing with horse archers. If you are able to stop him from going into like 20 plus horse archers, your horseman will be more than fine enough. Now, +1 ranged is not as good of an upgrade against horse archers as against other archers, as they are as they do pretty suitable amounts of damage. But you know, it's never bad to have it. Obviously, once you hit H3, you want to be making, say, knights. Knights are obviously not as fast as horsemen, and they cannot really catch up to um, uh, horse archers. But their damage output is insane, and again, they need a good mass of horse archers to pepper them down fast enough for them to die. So if you were able to keep your opponent's numbers low, your knights are going to be just fine with dealing with whatever army your opponent can build up. The main problem comes if your opponent tries to add in spearmen, especially in H2, when you're still in H2 and your opponent's H3 and he's able to go into horse archers and then add spearmen to block your horsemen. At that point you obviously want to transition to archers yourself, but at that point he does have a sizably better composition, I would say, just because H2 archers into H3 horsemen and spearmen, it's that's not fair as well. But you can still deal with that within reason. Now, my opponent only going to be adding them now, but it's just something to keep in mind. With how many villagers my opponent lost throughout, your eco should be within reason, unless your opponent's playing extremely safe and they got an insane amount of sheep. You should be able to pick off at least some of his economy or deny him enough eco by adding his villagers and etc. that your economy is better than theirs. And then you also hit H3, getting your step readout, which is an automatically huge boost to your economy. Now I did let my opponent gather a few relics because I was just say lacking APM to concentrate on that. Yeah, we really could have done more to stop him from doing so. Now here I decided to add in crossbows, and the reason I want to do that is while crossbows are not as good technically against dealing versus horse archers as archers, just because they're a bit more expensive, and they're also not as good against spearmen as archers, is that you have an excess amount of gold income, and crossbowmen are not that heavy on the gold, while they're pretty heavy, while archers are pretty heavy on the wood. And also my opponent has a few knights in store, so both of those things make it adding crossbowmen quite nice. And also just the fact that you don't need to upgrade your archers into castle age if you go for crossbowmen instead makes it just a very easy unit to go for, because you don't need to have an exact counter to something to counter it essentially. I need a ranged unit, so crossbowmen, while might not be an ideal, are totally fine to build. They will still do the job. Now, as my opponent had a low amount of units, I'm able to steamroll into the base, and while if he had say like 20 plus horse archers, my knights would have been obliterated. Since that's not the case, as I've been keeping his numbers low, he just cannot kill them fast enough. Even if he micros well, which if I'm honest he didn't do too well, but even if he micros well, it will be really hard for him to have good trades versus my knights. Now this is just a general thing, but obviously when you're harassing your opponent, it's always good to split a few units off. While their notification is going off in the main base, you can split a few units to the side and get a decent number of villagers as they're not paying attention to that location as they're being raided in the main base. Here I make a small mistake by we not having enough gold income, which is really poor from the Mongol here, as you just generally want a lot of gold income, as you can just inflate your gold and then just trade off to whatever resource you want. So definitely just put on more units on gold than I did here. But yeah, my opponent did get a second C, but this game is basically over. I mean, it has been for quite a long time. His only chance was to do some aggression when he was in H3. His best bet would have probably been to spam mana terms to go for spearmen plus horse archers, but he didn't do either. So the second C would need an insane amount of time to pay off. Rus does not have the best second C plays, and this one came in pretty late. So just in general, it takes very long for Rus to build up their economy, and given that his economy was already in a weaker state, it's not going to do much for him. Obviously, you want to be careful here with Vololos can't turn games, and Rus has the scariest Vololos as the monks can be easily pushed by horse archers. So if he is able to build up a little bit of a lead of horse archers, you might want to be careful with your units, especially your non-mobile units like the crossbow, that they can just get intercepted by the knights, by the horse archers and killed. But yeah, that's basically it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.